What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Yesterday, we did have Sony share their financial results for the past fiscal year. They gave us an update as to how many PlayStation 5 consoles they've sold, as well as strategy going forward that, yes, does include them exploring outside of just that PlayStation 5 console just a bit more, and we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about an update for Nintendo Switch Online that was dropped last night from Nintendo that is bringing a highly requested title to the service, and then we'll also be taking a look at Square Enix, who has been having a rough go of things recently because, of course, some of their big releases just did not live up to their expectations, but who didn't see that one coming? So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that and support the channel further, you can click the join button down below this video. And we'll start today with Xbox Game Pass games for the rest of this month and like the first week of June. We can see this posted up over on news.xbox.com. Starting at the top with two games that are already available: Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, cloud, console, and PC. And then Chants of Sonar, cloud, console, and PC. Moving up to May 16th, we have EA Sports NHL 24, cloud, specifically on EA Play, and Immortals of Avium, that's cloud, PC, and Xbox Series X and S. I recommend checking this one out. Interesting take, I guess, on first-person shooting with magic. But either way, definitely, I think, worth at least downloading and trying. Senua Saga Hellblade 2, cloud, PC, and Xbox Series X and S. Of course, hits the service May 21st, and we'll see how that one turns out there. Galactic Air, cloud, PC, Xbox Series X and S, and Haunty, cloud, console, and PC, go into the service on May 23rd. Moving up to May 28th, we have Moving Out 2, cloud, console, and PC. On May 30th, we have Humanity on cloud, console, and PC, and then Lords of the Fallen on cloud, PC, and Xbox Series X and S. I'm interested in this. I haven't tried it at all yet, but it going into the service at the end of the month seems like a good time to download it and see what we have there. And then on June 4th, we have Firework on PC, and then Rolling Hills, cloud, console, and PC. So not a bad way here, I'd say, to close out the month and then go into June, with obviously the big one here being Hellblade 2. There's been a lot of scrutiny around the lack of advertising for that game, but I mean, if it goes in the Game Pass like we're all looking at it now, of course, it'll be there to download and we can try out. But I would like to see a bit more of a push, because this is Ninja Theory putting out this premiere game, even though it's not going to necessarily be a full price title. It's going to be 100 hours long. It should be something, though, that shows off, we'll say, the power of the Xbox Series X, with obviously a big focus on visuals and that sort of thing. So here's hoping it works out well for them, because we've seen what's going on with Microsoft right now, and who knows what the future holds for any of these studios. Also, we've been seeing a trailer drop for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero pretty much every month, just sort of showing off the different characters that'll be in the game. And now we're starting to look at this maybe as a 2024 release. We can see this is posted up. This is over on Xputer. It says Dragon Ball Sparking Zero rated in Singapore. 2024 is the release year stated, which we can see here in this screen capture. And it's also been rated by the ESRB. So this is making me think that maybe at, we'll say, Summer Game Fest, we could see the release date dropped there. I mean, we're going into the next like 2 months or so of just being a bunch of different events happening, plenty of places for this game to show up with that release date. And they're just doing trailers consistently with different characters every month, but they can kind of speed up those trailers if they want to just have the full reveal done by release. But I'm kind of looking at this now as maybe a holiday 2024 release. Here's hoping. Oh, and with Ghost of Tsushima coming up this week on Steam, of course, people have wondered about Steam Deck support. Well, Nixes did post this up over on X, and they say you may notice that Steam marks the game as unsupported for Steam Deck. This is due to the Legends co-op multiplayer mode requiring Windows to access PlayStation Network integrated features. Nonetheless, it will work on the Steam Deck. In fact, they mention actually spending time optimizing it and making it work well on these different PC handhelds. The only thing about that is odd is, of course, if you don't have access to PSN in certain countries, you just can't buy the game. But on the Steam Deck, you just won't be able to play multiplayer. So it feels like they should be able to turn that off for these different regions and just sell them the game, the single player side. We have seen some companies just do Steam Deck specific features and turn off different settings. Like we had that happen with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, where the online requirement was pulled back for the Steam Deck. It just seems kind of odd here because you just turn off that Legends mode and PSN requirement, all of a sudden, a bunch of other regions can start buying the game. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Sony and their recent report for their fiscal year. The big thing, of course, people were talking about how many PlayStation 5 consoles have sold, but there was one other thing that really surprised a lot of people, and I think is certainly starting to steer the ship in a certain direction for Sony when it comes to their strategy for multi-platform releases. Well, we can see actually this is posted up, and this does go over all the different aspects for their financial report over on Install Base Forum. But the big one I wanted to point out, of course, are the PlayStation 5 console numbers, where in this past fiscal year, they managed to sell 20.8 million PlayStation 5 systems. That is quite significant for them when it comes to just the PlayStation console. That's up there basically with like some of their best years ever. They did miss technically their revised forecast of 21 million, but I mean, it was very, very close. Obviously, they're 20.8 million, and this will then push up their overall number of PlayStation 5 consoles sold to 59.3 million. In their last quarter, they sold 4.5 million systems. That was down about 28% from the previous quarter, but their fiscal year total was up. Now, it does appear that they have peaked with their PlayStation 5 system sales, as they are expecting in the current fiscal year that we're in now, that will run all the way until March, end of March 2025, to sell 18 million consoles. So we're already kind of peaked, and we're sort of on the other side of the bell curve now. Nonetheless, that quarter that they sold 4.5 million, according to Daniel Ahmed, outsold the Xbox Series 5-1, which is, okay. So we know that the Xbox has been struggling when it comes to hardware sales. Microsoft is expecting it to continue to decline, but also technically Sony is as well. They're just selling at a much more rapid pace than Microsoft is here. Now, they are still tracking behind the PS4 launch line globally, but in the US, they are actually tracking ahead of the PS4 and well ahead of the PlayStation 3. Now, to go along with the console sales, there was one major highlight that was pointed out by Sony as they went through this stuff on their call with investors. They did a presentation and they talked about Helldivers 2. Remember, this came out at the beginning of February. Well, they said the game has now sold 12 million copies as of May 5th, and that is absolutely ridiculous. In fact, it is now the fastest selling first-party PlayStation game of all time. It actually beat out God of War Ragnarok to take that spot, and that is incredibly impressive. Of course, we know it did also sell on PC day one, and this is an interesting spot for Sony to be in. Now, this is a live service game, so that's sort of the way that Sony is able to, I'll say, sell this to their user base in the sense that, hey, it's not a single-player, big narrative-driven experience. We want to do the live service games day one, PlayStation and PC, just to make sure we have a high concurrent player count, because that's basically what these live service games need to run on. But I'm telling you, looking at Helldivers 2 and the fact that we believe that there are more PC players than there are PlayStation 5 players, I mean, come on, Sony is looking at that and seeing money all over the place. Yes, even for some of their single-player games. In fact, along with this, they did talk about some of their strategies going forward, and in fact, Genki captured this from their conference call. And they say, enhancement of first-party software and PC deployment. I do believe that we're going to see a launcher from them. Who knows how well that'll go over, because people obviously are very tied to Steam, but I think they're going all in on PC, so much so that before the end of this generation, I think one of their big first-party single-player games will launch PC and PlayStation 5 day one. It's probably be a new intellectual property, a way that they can really gauge things when it comes to that, and we'll see how it does there. Also, for the rest of this year, Concord is still scheduled to come out. They just went ahead and reinforced that. And they also mentioned something about an event coming up. This was actually part of their announcement for the new CEOs that'll be taking over in June. They said later this month, you will learn more about the long-term vision for Sony Group and the essential role SIE plays in that vision. As I mentioned previously, fiscal year 24 marks the start of the mid-range plan period for Sony Group, in which we will set the course for sustainable growth. So yes, there's a showcase coming up, go figure, but there's also this corporate strategy meeting that will be next week on Thursday the 23rd, and they'll have the chairman, CEO Yoshida, and president, CEO, and CFO Totoki there to discuss all kinds of stuff, I guess, about their strategy going forward, and yes, that's going to include SIE, apparently, just in a big way. So very interesting stuff here. We'll keep an eye on exactly what happens with that, and then most likely a showcase that'll be probably right around that time, I assume, so that they can really go in depth with that corporate meeting. But yes, the PS5 continues to roll along right there seemingly with the PS4 lifetime, and Helldivers 2 absolutely out of control. The best-selling PlayStation game of all time. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Arrowhead, Sony, no one. Next up, let's talk about Square Enix and how a bunch of their recent releases did not live up to expectations, and that's weird because we never hear something like that from Square Enix, but we can see this is posted up by Takashi Machizuki over on Bloomberg, where he says Final Fantasy XVI sales fell short of expectations. The initial momentum was in line with expectations, but the games failed to reach fiscal year goal as momentum slowed. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Sales fell short of expectations. Initial momentum didn't reach an internal target. Foam Stars fell short of expectations. Is anyone shocked on that? Anyway, they do mention that they're confident Final Fantasy XVI can achieve its goal over the original 18-month sales plan, and we know that they are moving that to PC, and that will probably give it a nice second win there when it comes to sales. Oh, and for anyone out there who was concerned about canceled projects, and one of them maybe being Dragon Quest XII, Takashi Machizuki did get confirmation from Square that Dragon Quest XII remains under development. So good news there, but Square did have some struggles when it comes to the stock market, with their shares tumbling by the most in 13 years on their week outlook, that being 16% biggest decline that they've seen in more than a decade. And a lot of that has to do with them basically saying, hey, we're going to spend the next 3 years reorganizing and then getting set up for the future, which you just told a bunch of shareholders that it's going to be a little while before you see any major growth with your money. So naturally, they'll take the money out and throw it around somewhere else. But on top of this, Square Enix is also set for what else but layoffs. I mean, we hear it constantly in just the video game industry over the last couple of years now. This over on VGC, saying according to people who were in attendance, Square Enix president Takashi Kiryu said that both the company's American and European arms would be hit with layoffs, which will happen over the course of the next month. The scale of the layoffs wasn't shared, but staff were told that people working in publishing, IT, and Square Enix's collective indie games division will be predominantly affected. And it's unfortunate, but based on what they've said, it's not shocking to hear that their indie division would be affected, since they mentioned focusing heavily on HD games or just bigger budget titles, right? Like these Final Fantasy XVII just being an easy example to point towards. But we know now the way that Square is going to be reforming seems to be a heavy emphasis on multi-platform day one. And we'll see how that works out for them, because over the next, like I said, 3 years or so, they're going to be getting things in order to make that push, I assume, with Nintendo's new system, and yeah, the PlayStation 6 and whatever Microsoft has set up next. We do know they are, of course, working on, again, Dragon Quest XII and the conclusion to the trilogy for Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, but Square is in a strange moment right now, and they really need to get things figured out for the future, because this is, I think, a make or break period for them, and it depends on how things come out the other side when it comes to their HD releases, and that is quite the gamble, but here's hoping they can figure things out, especially when it comes to Final Fantasy. Next up, let's talk about an update for Nintendo Switch Online, as we have 3 different games heading into the service. And yes, one game in particular has been asked for over and over and over again. There was a lot of confusion why it wasn't there for Mario Day as an example, but we can see this is posted up over on X from the official Nintendo account, where they say 3 classic games are now available to play for Nintendo Switch Online members. These are all Game Boy titles. We have Super Mario Land, Alleyway, and Baseball. Super Mario Land has been asked for over and over and over again, because we had the second one technically, and now we have the original handheld Mario game. This was a big deal back then. Now, while you look at it now and it looks downright ancient, prehistoric even, I mean, this was a big deal. It was handheld Mario. Back then with the Game Boy, I mean, it was really cool to be able to play a game like that on the go. And I mean, I'll fire it up just to play around with it a bit, but again, it is very, very rudimentary stuff with Mario. The coins are static. Mario barely looks like himself, but there is certainly a nostalgic flair to this one. And I do think many people out there who have never tried it should at least do it just to see the roots and where everything started there for Mario way, way back in the day. Then we have Alleyway, which is sort of I guess it is just a Breakout clone, but look, Breakout is an awesome game. It's always reminded me of like kind of the Tetris setup where it's basic, but it's addictive and fun. So yeah, that's another one that I think is worth firing up just to, again, check out. And then baseball. There's probably better games to play, better baseball games to play, I'm sure. Again, this was another big deal back then to be able to play something like this as like a handheld title. It very much reminds me of that original Nintendo baseball game, just on the Game Boy in that chromatic green and black setup. So not a bad update overall with some of these games, and especially since it is going into that $20 per year tier with the original Game Boy games, and having now really the entire history of Mario up to the Nintendo 64 is also pretty fun, just to be able to kind of go through and see the basic rudimentary handheld Game Boy version of Mario, and then up to the very basic, rudimentary 3D version of Mario on the N64, but definitely worth checking out. Let me know what you think of Super Mario Land, especially if you've never played that one before and you're firing up for the first time on NSO. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, would you buy a PlayStation handheld if it played the console games natively, at lower resolutions, etc., for the same price as the PS5? 61% say no, 39% say yes, and I wanted to throw that in there, the same price as the console, basically. I mean, by the time maybe a handheld comes to market from Sony, we might have the PS6, but somewhere between that $400 and $500 range, because that's basically where things like the Steam Deck OLED are sitting, the ROG Ally, even more than that. These handhelds aren't going to be cheap to put together if people want that native console experience on the go, and then we have to also talk about other things that you have to sacrifice, especially things like battery life, visuals, but I do think that there is a market there, as we're seeing with some of these PC handhelds and even the Switch, showing that people do really like to have these larger experiences, at least in that form factor, just as an option, with the Switch also being a hybrid. So I do think this is on Sony's radar, and I wouldn't be shocked if next generation they have two SKUs, and one as a handheld and one as a console. So that could be interesting to see. Maybe Microsoft has a handheld, Sony has a handheld, then Nintendo's rolling along with their hybrid system. That'd be a fun generation to see shake out. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from J Pillow, says, the class action lawyers get lots of money. The people get sadness. Yeah, I mean, out of all of that, the people who got paid the money at that, technically, are the lawyers. That's usually how it works out with these class action lawsuits. People will get like a $12 check in the mail. The lawyers will end up with like millions of dollars. And that's one of the reasons that you will see lawyers go around trying to get a bunch of testimony and people's accounts of this stuff, because they're trying to push that class action lawsuit really for them to make a bunch of money. And I'm sure it sounds great for a lot of the consumers, because it's like, wow, we're gonna get paid out all this money. But then you divide it up by the thousands and thousands of people who are part of it, and then you get a check in the mail that's barely worth the paper it's printed on. So yeah, I guess with the Joy-Con drift lawsuit, I'm sure the lawyers got paid, but at the end of the day, it gets dismissed and feels like a waste of time for everyone else. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. There is Sony's financials, the PS5 rolling along towards 60 million units sold, and the potential for a showcase here in the next week or two. What would you like to see announced there? And then also, what about NSO getting this update for different Game Boy games? Are you going to be checking any of those out here in the coming days? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.